So I was kind of looking around online for how you can actually have state be mutable. Because someone on my Discord asked me like, why is it that we can't mutate state, like using like a traditional variable dot whatever and change state? And the reason is React is immutable for a particular reason. Like a lot of people argue that immutability is better and cleaner for your code. It makes it more better to manage, I guess, when you know that your objects don't just randomly change. And I think there's some merit to it, but at the same time, I think that is an opinion that a React kind of put on us, which I think should have been left up to us to add ourselves if you want immutability. But anyway, I was looking through dev.to. This is a cool site that has a bunch of like just random web dev posts and stuff. Check it out. But basically, what I want to do is I want to be able to change state like this. So if you look at this little example, he does state count plus plus, right? So in React, typically you'd have to use a setter. So you'd have to say like, get a second array element here, call like set state. And then over here, you have to call set state. Then you have to pass it like a callback function with count and then return a function value of count plus plus. It's just a lot of extra work in my opinion. There are benefits to having immutability or immutable code, honestly, but what I wanted to show you is my approach to kind of redoing his code, because he has all his code hosted up here. And I was looking through it. It might be a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, but let me show you what I got. This is a good exercise because we're going to be touching on a bunch of different hooks. So if you're kind of new to hooks, it'd be good to understand this. Let me clean up some of this code real quick because I was hacking around with it. Let me zoom in. All right, so I have a Next.js app set up. It doesn't really matter if you don't know what Next is, but what I want to show you is I have two labels, two inputs, I mean, and when the user types into the input, the onChange listener fires off, and you can see here I'm updating state by doing traditional JavaScript mutations, right? I'm taking a person.name property and I'm just updating its value. And when I do that in the UI, like you'll see that this is actually updating. So if I put Bob and age of 30 or something, you'll see that this state is actually updating in React and it's re-rendering the page correctly. Now, the question is, would you actually want to do this in person? I don't know. It's really personal preference. It's up to you. But I thought it was interesting to kind of show you how I did this because you're going to learn a lot about different hooks. So I added a new hook called useObject. This is a custom hook. In order to create a custom hook in React, you just have to have the use keyword in front of it, and React under the hood knows how to like set that all up as a hook. So I'm passing in an object with a name and an age. And under the hood, if we look at this hook that you scroll up a little bit, it's really a short little hook. But what's happening here is we make a function that takes in an initial object. So we're passing in that object had name and age. And we're setting up I'll talk about this step in a second, but we're setting up basically a reference to an underlying object. Okay, so we use the useRef hook. You know what this hook is? Basically, it's a way to actually allow for immutability in React. You can actually get like mutable variables, objects, arrays, or whatever. So I'm creating a useRef. And when you call this hook, it returns an object that has a .current property on it. You'll see down here, we do lower level object .current. So the idea is I'm passing a JavaScript proxy object into my useRef so that I always have a copy of the exact same proxy object when React does this re-rendering and whatever. So this .current, lower level object .current will always point to that proxy object. And I'm returning that here. So anytime that I do person.name and change any of these values here, it's actually going to call the set function of that proxy. So if you don't know much about proxies, basically it's a JavaScript construct. You pass it in an object, and you can also pass it in a get method or a set method. And you can kind of like extend the functionality of what happens when you try to set a property on an object. So in this case, whenever I try to assign something to a property such as name or age, it's going to call this function. Target is going to be equal to the existing object, and then key is going to be either name or age. So I'm basically saying just update the object normally, like we normally do in JavaScript. And then I'm calling an update method, right? So if you don't call this method, you'll see that React doesn't actually re-render the page because React isn't bound into state at this point. So if I were to refresh this page and type in something, it just doesn't work, okay? And the reason again is because React needs to actually know when to re-render, because right now, like, nothing is bound to state. So it doesn't have like that hook set up to know like when person is changing. So we had to force an update like this. This is kind of hacky, but I don't know if there's another way to do this. But basically what happens is every time this proxy runs, every time you try to change a property on this object that you passed in, or I guess on the proxy that you are returning in the ref, we need to just basically force an update. So here we have some code that basically says use reducer. Reducer is a function which kind of allows you to invoke it, and whatever value that you return, it's going to be equal to state. So typically this would have like state, and this is like an updater for the state. It's very similar to like the use state hook, but it's just a little bit different. I think use state is actually used using use reducer under the hood. Like if you go to React and look at the code base and look at use state, I believe the internals of use state actually just calls use reducer. But the main benefit of reducer is you can have like if statements and switches in here that makes it more complex. But yeah, I don't really like using reducers. I think they're kind of confusing, but I guess it's good to know that it's there. So basically every time you call the update method, all I'm doing is just incrementing the last value by 1. So nothing too simple. I probably could have used the use state here, honestly. Like I could have used use state. I think this will still achieve the same thing because I just have to call it differently here. Anyway, let's just keep it as reducer. So again, what we're doing is we just change a property, which invokes the proxy, which invokes an update method, which forces an update, and then React will re-render the page using the latest version of person. So now I can actually type into this. Let me refresh the page. I probably broke something. Cool. So yeah, I don't know. Again, like I don't know if there's... This code probably doesn't truly work in every instance. Like if you were to pass an array or pass in primitives, this probably won't work. This is a very specific use case that only works for objects with the proxy. And then also probably doesn't work for deeply nested objects. So you'd have to like figure out how to, do that. But I guess I just wanted to share with you, like once you know how to do more with like the React hooks that come out of the box, you can really build out some complicated stuff and like extend what React gives you to kind of make it whatever you want it to be. So like in this case, if you really love immutable code, or if you really like mutating state and mutating code, like you could do this technically. But I think there is a third-party library out there that kind of does what I just showed you. So I'd probably use that instead of what I'm doing because my code probably has bugs. Anyway, have a good day and happy coding.